And for more on the prospect of an SOC, a holding company, we're now joined by Managing Director of MVR Attorneys, Matodzi Ratshimbilani, and he joins us now in studio. Matodzi, thank you so much for your time this evening here in SABC News. I mean, just talking to you just off camera, looking at this news story that emerged today, I know that the Sunday Times was reporting on this matter, and of course bringing into question, state-owned enterprises being placed under one holding company. What are your thoughts on that?
Bali, I mean, the first thing is that this is not a new concept. It's been in the offing for a while, albeit in different shapes and forms. As long ago as 10 years ago, there was a commission that was put in place to investigate, the efficacy of state-owned enterprises, and one of its recommendations was to ensure that there's an all-encompassing legislation that governs state-owned entities. And the problem that had been identified was that one of the things was that it was done in a very haphazard way, done differently for different organizations. Part of that recommendation to rationalize the governance framework also contemplated setting up a holding company, which in a way would play the role that the DPE was playing, because it's in the case of the DPE, it was a shareholding ministry. In this instance, the wisdom seems to be that they would like to create a shareholding company, above which there will be the president and the government at large.
And, one would say when we saw the 7th administration, get underway with their business, and we saw President Cyril Ramaphosa announcing, the presidency department, the planning and monitoring evaluation, we all thought that the SOEs would either fall under that department or be placed under, the various departments. Why this move?
Yeah, look, I think the argument for placing entities under specific departments seems to be that they need to reside below government departments that are their policy makers. So in other words, if you are dealing with electricity issues, it should sit under the Ministry of Electricity or Energy. Now, what is happening here, that's the one role of regulating entities. What we are talking about here is the shareholding. So this is the people who really control the business of the entity. So it could very well be, and the act is not as detailed as acts often are. It's not unthinkable that in as much as there will be a holding company which sits as a shareholder, these departments or these entities will still rely on their line departments for regulatory supervision.
And who gets to benefit, from placing these companies under one holding company? I mean, because we know that there's been so much criticism, particularly in the last administration, with these departments and the shareholding being placed under, the Department of Public Enterprises. Who gets to benefit from this?
Look, I think if it's done right, the country will benefit, because then the state-owned entities will be governed in a uniform way. One of the stated objectives of this bill is to ensure that the appointment of directors into state-owned entities it follows a more enhanced process. Currently, people who get appointed into state-owned enterprises directors, and I know that because I've done 4 stints myself, you do not attend an interview, they look at your CV, and it's good enough. But this particular act and the process which will be implemented by the holding company includes interviewing potential board members, and the act says they are gunning to have a transparent process. What that means can be debated, but I think that will be actualized in the regulations, because the intention of the act is for this process to be transparent and to identify people with the right skills. So I think that's a positive, because we come from a history where, you will find someone who was in an unrelated profession and experience being thrown into the end to run a complicated business such as an airline, for an example. So I think that part, it should resolve that in part.
And I mean, it reminds me of the State Capture Commission of Inquiry, where some of the testimonies coming through was the criticism of placing people with zero experience in very crucial positions. Yeah,
in fact, I mean, this bill in part takes its guidance from the State Capture report, because this was identified as a problem. The appointment of directors and governing bodies was highlighted in the report as one of the areas of concern, and in fact in its supporting memorandum it states that in part it's intending to see through those recommendations.
Will it make it easier for the country to deal with corruption? Should we see it in any of these companies?
Look, it's always hard to tell. Corruption is never caused, but we are not short of legislation. As matters stand, state-owned entities in South Africa are primarily governed by company law. And company law is an old subject. It's highly predictable. There's enough case law to be able to guide people when they are in doubt. I would not agree that corruption comes about because of weaker legislative system. It's rather a people factor. So I wouldn't be too hopeful to think that it will eliminate corruption altogether. But I think the fact that people are watching and there's some semblance of process in appointment of people and performance, one of the objectives of this bill is actually for the president through his council, state-owned entity council, to bring about a strategy for all the entities. I think in a way, I see it as a way to a better place, but it's not a panacea to resolve all the problems that we have.
But of course, this needs to be approved by Parliament. And, when it comes to the ANC, looking at some of the reports coming out, some saying that, well, this is not a resolution of the ANC's conferences. Yeah. Can we expect, Ramaphosa to be supported by his MPs to, see this come into law?
Look, I mean, that question is a bit above my pay grade. I'm just a lawyer, but one would think that as these things go, they will make sure that they argue and let sense prevail in the National Assembly for them to be supported. It's a legislation formation process. It can, meet some political obstacles, but I think everyone is agreed that our state-owned entities have seen some difficult times in the recent past, and I think anything to try and streamline processes and to make the governance framework better, I would hope that the members of the assembly would support it, even if it means they suggest some tweaking or some variation of it. But on the whole, the need for a streamlined regulatory tool of state-owned entities, it's long overdue.
Mr. Ratshimbilani, thank you so much for your time this evening.
Thank you.
All right, that is Matodzi Ratshimbilani. He is the Managing Director of MVR Attorneys. They're talking to us about this holding company, which, this conversation is now beginning. And of course, this is when it comes to how the country will be taking care of its state-owned entities.